Welcome back to my Obi-Wan rewrite. This is part 2 where I will be going over episode 2. Like episode 1, I will be going over my first impression criticisms and then go over the episode itself and what I believe needs to be rewritten and how I think the events of the story should have taken place. Reminder, I'm not that much of a Star Wars fan, and as I rewrite the episodes, I always have the lore of the Star Wars universe in mind, but please feel free to educate me and correct me, but just be kind about it, like always. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. First criticism. Leia is strongly coming off as a spoiled brat. Her fiery, independent nature does not come off as cute or charming. To me, it's annoying. I don't mind that she's observant and hones in on key details. She has obviously been given an advanced education because of her royal status, and she's using that in the real world, giving us glimpses of the Leia that we were first introduced to. Second criticism, Reva again. I honestly feel that her character was mismanaged, because this episode is implying that she may be unstable. From what I'm getting, Kenobi is the big fish that all the Inquisitors hope to reel in, particularly Reva. However, it would have been better for her character if she would suggest things to the Grand Inquisitor instead of constantly going behind his back, showing that she is smart enough not to overstep in order to avoid unwanted attention on herself, but clever enough to manipulate the Grand Inquisitor. Third criticism, the big reveal.
He's alive, Obi-Wan. Anakin Skywalker is alive.
I can't bring myself to believe that Reva is skilled enough to be able to read Kenobi like she does, and yet the Grand Inquisitor can't read that Reva's about to kill him. That's why I believe that Reva should have been replaced with the Grand Inquisitor in this particular scene. The line, "I'm just going to take you to him. Lord Vader will be pleased." That line made no sense. I will definitely be rewriting this, but damn. I'm not an avid Star Wars fan, and this is frustrating. I can only imagine what a hardcore Star Wars fan would be feeling watching this. Episode 2 was the weakest episode for me, mainly because of the acting, specifically young Leia's act. However, the biggest issue is the amount of interaction Leia has with Kenobi throughout the series, and while there is no avoiding it, I'm going to do my best to limit it, but in a sensible way. Story-wise, the episode was okay, but if it was perfect, I would not be making this video. So let's go ahead and get into the rewrite. The first 12 minutes of the episode is fine in my opinion, but when Kenobi finds Leia, that's when things start to decline. So instead, when Kenobi is having his altercation with Vec, he does manage to incapacitate them, but Vec manages to prevent the door from shutting completely, allowing the fumes to air out. With no time to waste, Kenobi opens Leia's door, but she's hiding in one of the dark corners. By the time Kenobi spots her, she sprints past him. When he tries to catch her, he hears Vec and his men. He holds them off, but loses sight of Leia in the chaos. This is where Leia should have had her sequence of her running through the city, which inevitably gets her more lost, and finally she ducks in an alley and hides in a crawl space. Like I said, I wanted to limit Kenobi and Leia's interaction, and also Leia is strongly coming off as an entitled brat in this episode. I know it's supposed to come off as cute and comedic, but nope, that's not what I'm seeing. Maybe I just don't have a sense of humor. Also, I think it would be kind of neat when Leia is running through the city if the visuals would start to distort, showing how terrifying this is to a small child that grew up sheltered, similar to Disney's movie Snow White, or even in the movie The Labyrinth where Sarah is hallucinating a party. Not able to find Leia, Kenobi returns to Haja. The Inquisitors arrive not long after, and the Grand Inquisitor is not at all pleased with the turn of events and starts choking one of Vec's men with the Force, while asking how he's going to correct this. Vec pleads that they'll find Kenobi and the princess. The Grand Inquisitor snaps, saying he doesn't give a damn about the girl. With his victim turning blue and barely moving, Reva joins the conversation. Kenobi is a stranger to this planet, and anyone capable of smuggling him out can be easily swayed. Put a bounty on him, and they'll flush him out for us. The Grand Inquisitor lets go of his grip, turns to Vec, and orders him to get to work. The scene where the Inquisitors are arguing amongst themselves took what little threat their presence posed and just threw it out the window. Rewatching this, it comes off as toddlers fighting over a toy. But the real question is, why does the Grand Inquisitor not punish Reva? She keeps going behind his back, she insults him to his face in front of his subordinates, and yet he lets her get away with all this shit. If she was his favorite, it would make more sense. But he's made it pretty clear that he does not like her. In fact, it doesn't seem that anyone likes her in this show. Logically, you can't get away with half the shit she does unless you have people willing to advocate and defend you to some capacity. Clearly, this needs to be changed. First off, the Grand Inquisitor is the one calling the shots like it should be, and we start seeing his temperament when things don't go as he planned, and I tried to hint at this in episode 1. As for Reva, due to the rewrite that I did with her backstory, this is someone that is terrified to step out of line because she knows what that will ensue. But she's clever enough to get her point across without overstepping, the way someone with common sense would do. Kenobi seeks Hodge's help in finding Leia. He sends Jacob to get the word out and Kenobi goes with him. Right after they leave, Hodge receives a message. It's a bounty announcement on the Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi. Hodge ponders on what he should do or could do with this information. Leia finally crawls out of her hiding spot as hunger gets the better of her. She speaks to an alien in their language who's operating a grill. She tries to convince him to give her some food, claiming that her father will pay it back and more. The alien shoos her away. Timid but hungry, she stands her ground. This is where we start seeing Leia take her first steps in becoming independent because there's no one she can rely on as of this moment. Leia hears her name being called and she sees strangers running towards her. Unaware they are trying to help, she runs. Kenobi's informed that she's been spotted and runs to her location. However, he too has pursuers. A gunfight breaks out and the Inquisitors are informed. They take chase, but Reva encounters one of Hodge's men. Out of fear, he tells her everything and Reva makes the decision to go after Leia for insurance. Kenobi is becoming overwhelmed with the amount of bounty hunters chasing after him. Jacob calls out to him from the entrance of a secret tunnel. Kenobi creates a diversion, allowing him to enter the tunnel without being seen. Jacob knows the tunnels like the back of his hand and leads him to where Leia was last spotted. This was one of the few things I liked about this episode was the city landscape. Many have said that it gave off Blade Runner vibes, and I agree. However, one of the things that I don't think was utilized in this environment was an underground tunnel system that it would have obviously had because every city has some type of tunnel system, and it makes no sense why this one wouldn't and why Hodge wouldn't utilize it to his advantage. Also, Jacob, being the little scamp that he is, would probably be one of the few that would know the system the best. Reva is contacted by the 4th and 5th saying they've lost track of Kenobi and that they've been given orders to regroup. Irritated, Reva relinquishes her pursuit of Leia. As for Leia, she is unsure if she's still being chased or not, but she's too afraid to stop. She makes a questionable jump that leaves her hanging for dear life, but she's not strong enough and falls, but Kenobi uses the Force in time. However, the shock causes Leia to lose consciousness. See what I did there? With Leia safe, Kenobi makes his way back to Hodge, but he's already waiting for him just around the corner. He instructs Kenobi where to go and what tunnel to take as he buys him time. They go their separate ways. Unfortunately, when Kenobi used the Force, Reva was in range to feel it. She corners Hodge. He does his best to distract her, but the Grand Inquisitor instilled in her never to waste time. Don't waste other people's time. They might just take yours. Reva uses the Force and gets the information she needs and leaves a barely conscious Hodge to whatever fate. Again, I'm trying to limit Kenobi and Leia's interactions while still making sense. Some people, when experiencing a stressful situation, will faint. If grown-ass adults can faint, then it's reasonable that a child would also, especially if they thought they were about to die. I feel that I have to reiterate that I'm not as knowledgeable in the Star Wars lore as most fans would be, so I'm not sure if I'm using the Force correctly in my rewrite. As for Reva, I'm just trying to get her to make smart choices while hinting at the damage that's been done to her. Finally, at the cargo ship, Kenobi lays the unconscious Leia down, but right as he's starting the ship, he feels a menacing presence. As much as he doesn't want to leave Leia, he cannot allow this presence to come near her. Back into the cargo port, Kenobi and the Grand Inquisitor meet. I've been waiting to meet you for some time, but truth is, I'm rather disappointed. I've used this tactic before on the less experienced, but I expected more from you. I guess you're not as special as I thought you were, as he commends you to be. Kenobi's puzzled by his words that distracts him. The Grand Inquisitor sends a crate falling down on top of him, but Kenobi manages to jump out in time. He stays out of sight, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Is this what you've been reduced down to? Hide and seek? What happened to the Jedi that stood their ground? How disgraceful. Kenobi pays no mind to his words and focuses at the task at hand. The Grand Inquisitor starts using the Force, pushing crates around until Kenobi is forced out into the open. With nowhere to hide, they draw their sabers. The Grand Inquisitor strikes first and Kenobi blocks his attacks. They're equally matched, but it's clear that the Grand Inquisitor is more refined. Muscle memory is all that keeps the Grand Inquisitor's blade from making contact with Kenobi. Truly disappointing indeed. Even the less experienced was more confident than this. Kenobi tries to drown him out, but can't help but wonder how many of his brothers and sisters the Grand Inquisitor cut down, but there's no use in asking. Kenobi can feel himself reaching his limit, and the Grand Inquisitor knows it as well. Just surrender already. I couldn't give a damn about the girl. Would you just leave her here to fend for herself, or would you use her in your political games? What's it matter? Neither of you will be harmed, I assure you. After all, someone very special wants to meet you. It'll be more like a reunion between old friends. You might not recognize him at first, but I doubt it'll take long. After all, Lord Vader has an unforgettable presence. Kenobi is overwhelmed as a strange feeling emerges, as if he knows who the Grand Inquisitor is speaking of but can't place them. However, during the Grand Inquisitor's rant, he sees an opening and takes it. Kenobi plunges his saber through the Grand Inquisitor, who is just as surprised, but with delight. I guess you're not such a disappointment after all. Reva arrives as Kenobi runs back to the ship, knowing he doesn't have the strength for another fight. Reva looks down at the Grand Inquisitor as he breathes his last breath. She's unsure how to feel about this, but a slight grin appears without her knowledge. The roar of the ship departing snaps her back. The 4th and 5th arrive as Reva watches the ship leave. First time watching the series, I was anticipating a showdown between Obi-Wan and most of the Inquisitors, specifically the Grand Inquisitor. Holy shit, was that a letdown. With a title like Grand Inquisitor, I figured that they would be the most difficult obstacle to get through, or at least the most persistent, because they're the leader who is calling the shots or is supposed to be calling the shots, but no. Spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched the series. When Reva kills the Grand Inquisitor, it's safe to assume that she replaces him as the main antagonist until the big one comes into frame. This reminds me of Kill Bill and how Beatrix Kiddo had to go through all his lieutenants to get to Bill. And it would have made sense in this series. And I don't think there would have been any shame in using that. But Kenobi doesn't fight any of them. In fact, if my memory serves me right, Obi-Wan doesn't fight anyone that uses a saber except for Darth Vader. That's very odd. And clearly I wanted to change that because that's the whole point of Star Wars. That's why we watch it, to see the lightsaber fights. I know there's more to Star Wars than lightsaber battles. I apologize. I just said that out of anger. Like always, I like showing the protagonist struggling. The thing about this episode is that we don't get to see what kind of fighter the Grand Inquisitor is before he dies. And yes, I am painfully aware he comes back in episode 5. But again, he doesn't do shit. Since I rewrote him to be an intimidating leader, I somewhat envision him arrogant, especially when he has the upper hand in a fight, particularly when he knows that his opponent is much weaker than him, which leads to his downfall. I'm aware that there are comics with him in it, and I'm sure his character is probably more established in those comics, but I'm strictly sticking with what the show gave us. As for the end of the episode, it would have hit harder, in my opinion, if Obi-Wan wasn't told the identity of Vader, but came to that horrifying conclusion himself. The end would have been far more impactful had that been the case. That is it for episode 2. Everyone talks about which episode was the weakest for them, entertainment-wise, story-wise, etc. And personally, this is my least favorite episode because young Leia and Reva's character. This one was the hardest for me to get through, especially since I do have to watch these multiple times. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think so far of my rewrites. I apologize if I'm getting some things wrong. Like always, please educate me, and I will see you in the next episode. Please like and subscribe.